Hey guys, it's Ashley, and in today's video I'm going to be giving you my middle grade book recommendations for those of you who either want to start getting into middle grade or are just looking for something new. For those of you who don't know what middle grade is, it's basically books written for 8 to 12-year-olds who star a main character within that age range. It doesn't sound like a kind of book that would be interesting to an adult, but trust me, they are so fun and they're so great to jump into when you just want something fun and adventurous to read. There's something about a middle grade fantasy versus a YA fantasy that brings totally different feelings when you read it, and that's what I love about middle grade. For those people who say that middle grade is not for adults and I wouldn't be caught dead reading it ever in my lifetime, do you ever go back and catch yourself wanting to play video games that you loved when you were a kid, or wanting to watch TV shows or movies you loved when you were a kid, or listen to music you loved when you were a kid? Now you kind of get what I feel when I read middle grade. So today I'm here to bring you some of my middle grade book recommendations. Basically every middle grade book that I've read I've absolutely loved. I haven't found one that I've hated or disliked in any way, so I'm just gonna be recommending to you basically nearly all of the books that I've read recently, and some longtime favorites. I'm sure you know what those are already. And also share with you some of the middle grade books I'm looking forward to reading in the future. So without further ado, let's get started. So that book series that I was talking about, that if you know me, you know what I'm gonna say. Yeah. It's Percy Jackson. But instead of talking about Percy Jackson in this series, I want to talk about his latest books that are not necessarily written by him, but are published by him, and that are all of the books in the Rick Riordan Presents imprint of publishing. So these 3 books right here are the books that have been previously published by Rick Riordan Presents, but in this video I'm going to be focusing mostly on the newly released Sal and Gabby Break the Universe by Carlos Hernandez. This video is paid promotion by Disney Book Group, but trust me when I say that all of my feelings that I'm going to be talking about for the Rick Riordan Presents imprint are truly my own. I promise you, you all know how much I love these books. So Sal and Gabby Break the Universe is a little bit different than the books that Rick Riordan Presents has published so far, because this one has more of like a sci-fi element and less of a mythology element to it, I believe. But that's just what I'm getting from the synopsis, so for all I know there could be some kind of mythological element to this and I just am not seeing it right now. It's different in a good way. So we follow 2 characters who are so obviously named Sal and Gabby, and they meet in the principal's office at school. Sal is in there for the 3rd time this week for possible troublemaking, and Gabby is there supporting her friend who is basically saying that Sal put a raw chicken in her locker. So there's just one little secret between them, and that is that Sal can basically manipulate time and space, which is something very different than what I've seen in a middle grade book in a while. Gabby finds this out, basically takes it all in stride, and from there on out Sal knows that Gabby is somebody that he can work with. But their manipulation of time and space is basically putting the universe at risk, and they have to figure out how to write it again. I'm gonna read this last part to you because I just think that this encompasses everything that Rick Riordan's writing and his publishing imprint are all about. A sassy entropy sweeper, a documentary about wedgies, a principal who wears a Venetian Bauta mask, and heaping platefuls of Cuban food are just some of the delights that await in his mind-blowing novel, gift-wrapped in love and laughter. I'm really excited to read this, not only because, like I said, it's a little bit different than some of the other stuff that we've been seeing from them, but also because it's set in Miami, which I usually don't see books that are set in Florida, which is really cool. And plus it's got that Cuban influence. Both of the main characters, I believe, are Cuban, and the author himself is Cuban. So I'm really excited to get into that and see what that's about, because I loved the Maya and Hispanic influences in the Stormrunner by J.C. Cervantes. So I'm really excited to see what Carlos Hernandez brings to the table in this one. So Sal and Gabby Break the Universe came out on March 5th, so it is already out, and I will have a link down below if you are interested in picking it up and getting yourself a copy. But I highly recommend not only this book, but all of the Rick Riordan Presents imprints, as well as all of his writing in general. These stories are so great, and they just bring a smile to my face every time I read them. So if I were to give you one recommendation and a buttload of books to put on your list, it would be all of these. So the next book recommendation I have to share with you is one that you've probably heard me talk about 1,000,001 times on this channel. It's probably second only to the Rick Riordan books, and that is Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. I know that I've convinced a lot of you to start on this book, and if you haven't yet, you really need to listen to me because it's really good. The premise of this book basically follows this girl named Morrigan Crow who was born on the unluckiest day in the world, and people believe her to be cursed, and people believe her to be responsible for all of the bad things that happen in this world. So we open the book and she's basically writing apology letters to people for things that she had absolutely nothing to do with but is blamed for anyway. There is this day that takes place in this town, and it's basically where these high-end people can recruit kids for their guilds or whatever it's called. I can't really remember, but there's a moment where Morrigan gets like 6 recruitments and people are just shocked. And one of these people who wants to recruit her is Jupiter North from Nevermore. So one night she's whisked away to Nevermore and learns about the Wondrous Society and learns that the only way that she can stay in Nevermore for good and not have to go back to her crappy town where everybody is blaming her for everything is to compete to become a member in the Wondrous Society. And so we follow this girl who is trying to come to terms with the fact that she's not responsible for all the bad things that happen in the world, and just trying to navigate this super unique, super weird, but also whimsical world. I highly recommend this book for anybody who's interested in one of those kind of like Alice in Wonderland worlds where things are weird, but it's a good thing. Also, the characters are so cute, and the storyline so good, and the cliffhanger that leads to the next book that I haven't yet read but I'm dying to. Mwah. Next up, I'm going to talk about a middle grade book that I recently featured in a video, and that is The Dreadful Tale of Prosper Redding by Alexandra Bracken. Now, I've only read the first book to this as well. The second book I have yet to dive into, but from what I read in the first book, I can definitely recommend this book to anybody who is interested in a funny story. It's got its humorous points, but that's also very creepy and dark and takes just weird turns. If you don't know anything about this story, it's about this kid named Prosper who comes from a very prosperous family. And he finds out that one day his great something grandfather made a deal with a malefactor demon and then broke that deal, and how the demon has come to collect. Basically by possessing Prosper. Except something goes wrong and the demon doesn't really possess him, he only possesses his like left arm, and it's just really funny. But you come to find out things about his family and about the sort of like people around him that he's known that it makes it kind of a dark story. Also that kind of twist of sort of Halloween and sort of fall-ish and demonic activity also makes it a little bit more dark than some of the other middle grade books that I've read. And just following this 12-year-old kid as he's possessed by a demon, trying to figure out what the hell to do about it is just so great. So the next book recommendation that I have for you is in the vein of Percy Jackson. I've talked about it being similar to it, and that is The Adventurers Guild by Zach Loren Clark and Nick Eliopoulos. This story just reminded me of Percy Jackson and that writing style in the best way, because it's got the cutest, funniest cast of characters and just the wackiest humor. From what I remember from when I read this story, we follow these 2 friends named Brock and Zed. And basically we're in this fantasy world where when you come of age, you are chosen to be in a guild. And so Zed has always wanted to be in the Mages Guild and to learn like wizardry and things, and Brock has always wanted to be in the Merchants Guild like his family. But when the time comes for them to be chosen for a guild, they are both chosen for the Adventurers Guild, which is the death-defying, horrifying guild that nobody wants to be a part of unless you want to risk your life for other people. They're both chosen for this guild, and they have to try to navigate their way through it, and it's such a fun time. You meet these new characters, so many things happen. But I do just remember an overall feeling of just absolutely loving this story, and loving it a lot more than I was expecting to, which I think just added to that element of surprise and that element of happiness that I got when I read it. So if you're looking for a fun time with some wacky humor and just an overall Percy Jackson feeling to it, highly recommend. So the next story that I have to recommend to you is one that I was so excited to read when I heard that it was coming out, and I really loved. And I don't talk about it enough on my channel, and I feel like I need to change that because I just remember loving this story. And that is York by Lara Ruby. I got this book in an Owlcrate box, I believe, an Owlcrate Junior box, and I didn't even know it was a thing until I saw it in there, and I immediately was interested just by the synopsis. So in 1798, the Morningstar twins came to New York with this vision of these glittering skyscrapers and all of this future technological innovations and things. And then 57 years later, they disappeared, leaving their sparkling city and this thing called the Old York Cipher. It's basically this puzzle that's been laid into the city that they promised treasure beyond anyone's wildest dreams if they were able to solve it. But by the present day, nobody's been able to solve it, and the Old York Cipher has kind of just gone under the radar. You know, it's just become a fact of life that this thing is just made to never be solved, and it was just a trick and nobody wants to believe in it anymore. And so the present day characters we follow are Tess and Theo Biederman and their neighbor Jaime. They live in one of the last Morningstar buildings, and so when their landlord tells them that they need to get out because he's selling the last of the buildings to this real estate developer, the only way to save the buildings is to solve the Old York Cipher and prove that it's real and to prove that it's everything the Morningstar twins said it was. And so these three kids go on this journey to try to solve this cipher. Now, the reason that I wanted to read this book so badly was because it gave off such National Treasure vibes. If you guys have seen the National Treasure movies with Nicolas Cage, like, those were my favorite things, and honestly, they still are. Granted, even though Nicolas Cage has basically become a meme in and of himself now, those movies were just, I loved those so much. And so, coming into this book, reading the synopsis, I immediately was like, oh, National Treasure. They're solving puzzles that nobody believes are real. I loved this story. I thought that the way that they were solving the puzzle just became wackier and wackier. Tess and Theo are basically like child geniuses. They're so smart and they're so cute. And Jaime is just right along there with him, and he's got this kind of like street smart that Tess and Theo don't have because they're so book smart. It's just a great team trying to solve this really cool, crazy puzzle. If you're just interested in that kind of thing, like if you're interested in National Treasure and watching little kids solve really hard puzzles and things and seeing like the secrets of the city come to life, highly recommend. And so the last book recommendation that I have for you in this video is going to be Victoria Schwab's City of Ghosts. Now, I didn't give this book as high of a rating as I did a lot of her other books, A Darker Shade of Magic, for example. I still loved the story, and I thought it gave off a really creepy element, just like The Dreadful Tale of Prosper Redding did. And I thought it was also funny too. That's something that I really love about middle grade books, is that despite how serious and how, I don't know, death-defying they can be in some of the things that these characters have to do, they all have this element of just humor to them that makes them so inherently middle grade and made for younger audiences. This book follows this girl named Cass, and she is able to lift the veil between the dead and the living after a basically near-death experience. She has a best friend who's a ghost, and they kind of go on these adventures together. And the funny thing though is that her parents are actually ghost hunters and ghost writers and that kind of thing. So it's very like Danny Phantom-esque if you've seen that show when you were younger. So this book starts when Cass's parents get this TV show gig in Scotland, and the family flies out there, and so they're doing this TV show in these different cities that are known to be haunted, and they're trying to go into the history and prove if they're haunted and ghost hunt and that kind of thing. And so it's so funny because there's this dramatic irony that everybody is like, we all know that she can see ghosts, but her parents don't know, and yet that's their job. It's so funny in that way. But some of the things that Cass discovers in Scotland, in Edinburgh, are very dark and very creepy, but the characters were great, the plot was great, the idea is so fun, and highly recommend, especially if you're one of those people who might be interested in The Dreadful Tale of Prosper Redding or just in ghosts in general. Here's your book. Here it is. Take it, it's for you. So those are all of the recommendations that I have for you today, and before I go, I'm just going to share with you a few of the books that I'm looking forward to reading in the future and that I have on my current TBR. The first of which is one that I've had on my shelf for a really long time now, and I feel like a lot of people have read by now, and that's Furthermore by Tahereh Mafi. This book is also very Alice in Wonderland-esque, just like Nevermore. It's got that kind of whimsical world that I'm dying to get into, and it's kind of, I think, about this girl who is colorless, I guess. I don't know if she's specifically albino or what. Her father kind of disappears and she's got to go into this world to find him. And I've heard a lot of good things, and so I'm very excited to dive in at some point. I also have The School for Good and Evil by Soman Chainani on this list. I've heard a lot of good things about this series, especially from Reagan from Peruse Project, and it's just always a middle grade that I've wanted to get into. As far as I know, it's about these two girls who may or may not be friends, I can't remember, but the one of them who thought she was going to be destined for the light school is actually sent to the dark one, and the one who wanted to go to the dark school is actually sent to the light one, and flip-flop happens and all of this stuff goes down. But it's got like 5 or 6 or 7 books in this series, and they're all relatively thick. So I'm really excited to see what this is about, and I've just been dying to get into this for so long and I just haven't yet, and I don't know what's stopping me. And the last book that I have on my soon-to-be TBR is Dragon Pearl by Yoon Ha Lee, which is a Rick Riordan Presents imprint book that I haven't read yet. I've heard really, really good things about this story though, so I'm very, very excited to jump into it. I do only have an ARC, so hopefully I'll get my hands on the finished copy soon. The only thing that I know about this book really are that the characters and the characters' family that we follow are like descendants of fox spirits, or they are fox spirits. Also that it is a space opera, so I believe it's set in space. I think that's what that means, with some kind of Korean mythology element to it. So it's always been very high on my TBR, and I just don't know why I never got around to it. So it's definitely on my list to read soon. As soon as I'm done with the books that I really need to read now, this is gonna make its way to the top. So guys, that is going to be it for this video today. I hope I was able to give you a new book to check out, or that you are interested in starting to read some middle grade books maybe in the future. Like I said before, middle grade is such a fun time. It's so interesting to dive into because it's so different from YA, but it follows a lot of the same features and things. It's got its own kind of class of humor that I'm sure those of us who are, you know, really into middle grade can understand and know what I'm talking about. And I hope that if you decide to dive into middle grade that you do enjoy it and that you get what I'm talking about with the humor thing. Remember that Sal and Gabby Break the Universe is out now, and I do have a link in the description below if you guys are interested in picking it up and giving it a try. I know I'm definitely going to have this on my list to read in the soon-to-be future because I've loved everything that Rick Riordan Presents has put out, and I'm sure that this one is going to be no different. So thank you once again to Disney Book Group for sponsoring this video, and I think that's gonna be it. So thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you later. Goodbye.